Okay, so it is my honor to introduce our speaker today, Don Garcia. Don is a hydrogeologist and a licensed professional geologist with over 35 years of experience in environmental permitting and compliance, mine life cycle planning, and hydraulic projects. Don has worked in characterization, remediation, and reclamation projects at a wide variety of industrial sites, including oil fields, petroleum refineries, chemical plants, landfills, and mining operations. She has a strong experience in high-level reviews, due diligence, and preparation of documents associated with investor disclosure, which is also a plug for CPGs and often a requirement, which I think Don will touch on today. In addition to her extensive project experience, she has taught a short course on mine closure at the University of Guanajuato, Mexico, and been an invited speaker at mine closure workshops. She has been a presenter at numerous technical conferences, and she has served as geologist member of the Arizona Board of Technical Registration by appointment of the governor. The AIPG named her 2021 recipient of Martin Van Covering Memorial Award for Distinguished Service to the Profession of Geology. She received her graduate and undergraduate degrees from Bradley University in Illinois and California State University, Long Beach. Sorry, I might have mixed that up. Bradley is her undergraduate and California State is her graduate. She is based in Tucson, Arizona, and is employed by Stantec. And Don has been a member of AIPG for over 30 years. So now I will turn it over to our AIPG 2023 President, Don Garcia.
Thank you so much, Jake. And thank you also, Dan, for the DEI moment. So I'm really pleased to be able to be here with you today. I'm very pleased that we're recording this because not only for the folks who are online today, but also for the future. I just want to talk about some of the AIPG basics. So I think that even folks who have been in AIPG for a long time will hopefully hear some new things that you didn't know about AIPG. And for anyone who may watch this presentation in the future, it will give you information about why AIPG is so important and why it's a good thing for you to be an AIPG member. So what the heck is AIPG all about and what is it doing for me? That's the topic of my presentation today, and I'm going to go over some questions and give you answers. The big questions, first of all, are who are today's geologists? Why does AIPG exist? Why does it still exist when we have state licensing of geologists? And why do we need any regulation of geologists? Then I'm going to talk about what does AIPG do? How is it different from my state geological society or any other geological organization? And what does it provide to me to help me in my career? And then we'll end up with a few little upcoming events in AIPG. So let's first of all talk about who are today's geologists. So these graphs show the enrollment of undergraduate in the darker color, graduate in the lighter color. So students from the years of 1955 to 2022. Oh, well, guess when I graduated? 1981, right at that peak. And why did it drop precipitously in enrollment? Because there were no jobs. So this is at the time where the price of oil per barrel fell. There was no mineral exploration going on. It was really before the environmental boom started. So we were coming out of the oil embargo in the mid 70s, where petroleum had really started to take off in importance. And then we ended up being getting to the point that oversupply prices and everything went downhill. So you look at some of these trends, I mean, we're following the natural resources patterns, and it makes it very difficult to say that geology, shall we say, is a smooth career. There are ups and downs. It's very cyclic. Now, when you look at the graduate students, it's a little bit more stable, but I mean, that's not the same as undergraduates. So we are just not producing as many geologists right now as we have in the past. And also, when we had all this stuff happen, that doesn't mean the number of geologists who graduated in the early 80s are still practicing. Most of the people that I graduated with went out and found a different career because there were no jobs. So the other thing I want to point out is where we are as far as most people who have a graduate degree versus a bachelor. So geology is one of those very specialized fields, and you're seeing that most people who are practicing geology need to get a master's degree, and then you've got the PhDs over here. But you also have people with non-geology degrees who are practicing, whether they're at the advanced or at the undergraduate level. So in about 2017, there were almost 400,000 geologists employed in the US. And one of the things that I also want to point out is that we're only going to really look at US statistics because it is very difficult to get statistics from other countries. So we went from 2017, almost 400K to 250K in July 2022. And this graph shows the different types of basically careers, I guess you would say. Geoscience engineering managers, geoscience civil engineers, environmental scientists, and geoscientists. So it just doesn't say geologists. Some of these folks are actually coming out with a degree that they may not be able to actually become a CPG. So even though we say 250 about, we'll see it's a little bit less than 250 geoscientists employed in the US, not all of these folks are going to be eligible to become CPGs. But if they're interested in geology, they're certainly welcome to become part of AIPG. And so where do all these folks work? We've got a couple different things, the bachelor's versus the master's. So when you look at employment sectors, mining is really small. It's only 6%. Oil and gas is small at only 6%. Federal is pretty big. People teaching at a four-year college, that's 12%. So these are folks with a bachelor's degree. You look at the difference now for a master's, you've gone from 6% to 18% of geologists are now working in mining, and 24% in the state, 12% in federal. But you look at all professional services, could mean any type of consulting, but here we've kind of marked it by industry. None of these statistics are perfect as far as trying to figure out, are we in consulting services versus an actual mining company? But at least it's the statistics that we can get through federal databases. So that's who we are as geologists. Now, geologists weren't always regulated. In fact, there wasn't any licensing of professions, technical professions, until the early 20th century. And usually the professions that were being licensed started out with the architects, engineers. What happened is that there were a lot of building collapses, things like that. You think of, all these pictures, dramatic pictures of after an earthquake, or just shoddy construction. So versus start out with engineering and architecture. And those were in the 1920s. Well, the first geologist became licensed by a state in 1956. That was Arizona. So that's even before AIPG was formed. But as you can see, there was concern at this time about how about geologists? Geologists provide a lot of services that impact the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those things. So one of the questions people always bring up is, do we even need government regulations for technical professions? And this comes up every time there is a a movement to de-license geologists. Well, geologists are licensed because it is the protection of health, safety, and welfare of the public. The health means things like, are you going to be harmed by contamination? Are you going to be harmed by poor drinking water quality? Are you going to be harmed by the collapse of a building or a structure? And a geologist worked on that. So that also ties in with safety. And then the welfare is also things like, hey, I invested in a mining property, and was there a professional geologist who was involved in that project? So that can be your financial welfare. So literally, there are billions of dollars of public funds that are spent on projects that require geologic input. You think about any of the big constructions, tunnels, airports, water conveyances, water supplies, all of those things have a geologic component to them. So the money aspect is very significant. So most states now have technical licensure boards that have a mechanism to evaluate, first of all, is this applicant competent in their field of profession? For us, we're talking about geologists. And is there a way for that state board to react if there's a complaint against one of their registrants? So I was on the board in Arizona. We could invoke a financial penalty. We could require someone to take additional training. We could require someone to work only under the supervision of another PG, or we could simply suspend or take away their license and not allow them to practice as a geologist. And all of these things support an acceptable standard of practice. AIPG as an organization strongly supports the need for government licensing. And in another minute, I'm going to talk about why you need to have the two working hand in hand and how important it is to have both things. So let's talk a little bit about licensure. All of these green states are ones that belong to ASBOG, which is the Association of State Boards of Geology. So licensure is a government regulation to practice. ASBOG came into being, I want to say late 90s, early 2000s. And it was very interesting because in Arizona, we were already doing testing of geologists, and you had to take a test, but it was a state test. It wasn't under ASBOG. And there was a group of geologists who said, we need to have some standardization in this testing program, and it would be so much better to look at how it's done, say, for example, for the engineers, where they have a test that's done throughout all the states. You can still have a state-specific portion if you want, but it makes it so much easier for people to move from state to state if we're all under the same testing mechanism. So that's how that came to be. It is, another nonprofit organization, but the state boards have gotten that they are in alignment with ASBOG. It's the best way to carry out the licensing practice when you have a requirement for a test. And it makes it very easy to have comity, which is to apply to another state when you're going to move or you're going to practice in another state. And ASBOG is very well run. It's well organized. There are only 2 employees, though. So all those test questions, they come from the geologists who are practicing or part of the state boards in all those different states that have licensing. And then they also have volunteers, and they're called subject matter experts, and they create those questions that go on to the exam, and they test the validity of the exams. It's very nicely done. Part of this definition of being a professional means that you've had your education, you've got enough experience to be a professional geologist, and you've had the exam. So there's been a measure of the basic competency. Okay, so I said that AIPG was actually formed around the time that people were starting to look at licensing of geologists. So why was AIPG formed? Well, because people don't always do things the way they're supposed to. So it was in response to long-term problems of quality and fraud. Just think of the Wild West, the gold rush. There was all sorts of fraud going on. The real catalyst came because a non-geologists working in the oil fields of southern Illinois, and there were complaints that these non-geologists were writing bad reports and acting like they were petroleum geologists. So the Secretary of State said, well, geologists should find a way to certify true geologists from the fakes. So those folks said, okay, yeah, let's start something. And that was the initiation of the AIPG discussions. And AIPG was founded in 1963, so 60 years ago, to promote the profession of geology and to provide certification for geologists to establish a standard of excellence for the profession. There has been no prior organization focused on the profession of geology. And at the time, there were very few states that even had licensure of geologists. So this was actually a very big deal to have AIPG formed, and there was a lot of vision and dedication on the part of the geologists who first started AIPG. You may think, oh, well, that was 60 years ago. Surely, everything is all hunky-dory now. Well, no, it is not. So a big thing now for AIPG is our Certified Professional Geologist seal. Because of that, we are recognized in the mining profession. If you haven't heard of BRIEX, that was a big scandal, and that was in the mid-90s. There's a movie about it called Gold with Matthew McConaughey, if you want to get some background, Hollywood background on it. But this graph shows this was a company that was a mineral exploration company, and their stock was way down here. And then all of a sudden it started climbing, and people were saying, this is like the biggest gold discovery of our generation. And that stock went from dollars per stock to 260, almost $300 per share, and it was based on fraud. So that was a big mechanism to the requirement to have public disclosure reporting in the mineral industry. And AIPG CPGs are qualified qualified per their AIPG membership category to sign off on those reports. We talked a little bit about why we have AIPG, why we have licensure, why do we need both? There are some common goals in both, that our CPG demonstrates minimum competency, we're promoting ethical behavior, resiliency of infrastructure, because we're using professional geologists. That promotes a sustainable economy and responsible use of natural resources and promotes environmental protection. So some differences: licensure is a government permission. So it's like your driver's license, that's issued by the state. The business license, it's issued by a government. It's administered under the statutes and rules. So there is a technical rule. It says what a geologist is, what they need to do to be licensed under the state. There's no federal program, which is often a confusion for people who are outside of the U.S. In the U.S., the states take primacy over the federal government. In other countries, everything is federal rules. So it's kind of like, why would you do this by a state or a province or a county? Why isn't it a federal thing? Well, that's just the way the U.S. is set up, where the states have primacy. So the licensure has a very specific purpose to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. It establishes those standards for minimum competency based on education, experience, and examination. Typically, not all states do it quite the same way. Not all require examination. And most states with licensure are under the ASBOG examination. If they participate in that, and they pay ASBOG to produce that examination. Certification, on the other hand, is completely voluntary. It's through it's a professional organization, such as AIPG, but there are also other certifications. It's a demonstration of meeting an established standard. That standard is set by the organization. That can typically be education, experience, and peer review. So for some places, they will have for example, for the SME registered member, you can have a state license, but also for AIPG, you can have a membership category in the CPG that requires peer review. You do not have to have a state license. And that makes sense because not everyone's going to live in a state where there is a state licensing program. And we also have international members. The recognition is internationally because it's not just based upon the borders of the US. Most states, however, it's based on the borders of their state. So there are many states that if a registrant was to practice in another state and there was a problem, they don't actually investigate complaints that are not based in their home state. And that has been a bit of an issue for state licenses being recognized internationally. Whereas AIPG, doesn't matter where that geologist practiced. If you're a CPG and you did something in another country that had a complaint against it, we would open up a case and investigate that complaint. Another very important difference between the licensure program and a program that's under certification is that the organization that's a professional organization has typically additional goals. So AIPG is very much an advocate for the profession of geology, and we can be the advocate for geologists in front of government. If I was representing the state of Arizona on the Board of Technical Registration, I cannot advocate for geologists. I can only talk as a member of the board. So two very different things when it comes to politics and policy. Why do I need to belong to AIPG if I'm a professional geologist in a state or multiple states? Who does what is a big deal. So government agencies, yes, you can proctor the ASBOG exams and you can license geologists. You don't write the ASBOG exam questions. The government agency doesn't serve as members of the technical board. They need to get geologists to serve as those members. And they choose them from people who are professional geologists in their state. But in Arizona, for example, it started out as a group of AIPG members supporting this. And there have been AIPG CPGs on that board for decades. Where do they get their CEUs? Those aren't provided by the government. Those are provided by the professional organizations. The professional organizations support the careers of the students and early career professionals and professional development. The professional organizations are the advocates for the interests of geologists. They can certify and provide the development classes, provide field trips. And oftentimes we work in conjunction with universities and colleges, which also many professors write those ASBOG exam questions or serve as members of licensing boards, provide classes that can be counted as CEUs or student career days, professional development classes, and field trips. So the big thing is you need to have these things all together. The license can't exist without the support of the professional organizations, and the professional organizations support licensing within states. One of the big things about your CPG is that it provides recognition outside of the US. That's really important for people like me. I do a lot of work outside of the US, people in mining, petroleum, even environmental. We're always doing stuff outside of our country boundaries. It's a small world out there. Even if you never dreamed that you were going to be working in, the southern part of Argentina, well, things change. We already talked about that cyclic nature. So, what I thought I might be doing at one time in my life is not what I do now. And it's really a good career development tool to have in your back pocket to have your CPG, because you just never know what's going to happen. Why should you what sort of things should you tell geologists about why they need to belong to AIPG? This is just a list of things that AIPG does that supports their profession. If you're a geologist, you need to be part of this team that's supporting your profession. Advocacy for the profession, support of the exam development, which means writing questions every 6 months, providing continuing education programs, the workshops for the soft skills, which are things like public speaking, leadership, as well as the technical skills, the technical and professional development, engagement with the public about geosciences, publications and technical information sharing, outreach to industry, academics, governmental and non-governmental entities, participation in ASBOG and on licensing board, support of those licensing boards when they go through a sunset review, which means that someone is looking, might be every 5-10 years, but it's set up in the government that these boards just don't continue automatically forever in perpetuity. They get reviewed, and if nobody supports them, they will get defunded out of the government, even if they would be self-sustaining, because your fees as a professional licensed geologist in that state pay for the board's activities, but they will still be removed. And sometimes it's just because of people wanting to have less government, and they say, we don't need licensing of everything. We don't need so much government oversight. And then you go back to the discussions about why do we have licensing and need to show competency of geologists. And then, of course, the need for mentoring for students, EPCs, and even working professionals. The mentoring program within AIPG can provide not just what do I do to get that first job of a geologist, but I'm at a crosshairs or a Y intersection in my career, and I want to talk to somebody about, well, what should I do? Or do I go to this job, that job? Where is my career taking me? This is opportunities to ignite your passion, and that mentoring exists because of peer-to-peer, not just supervisor to mentee relationships. And of course, everybody loves the field trips, social events. People go on and on about how wonderful the annual meeting is. It's such great connections, lifelong friends. It's just really fun, as well as a learning experience and getting to hobnob with clients, people from all over the US, as well as the international visitors. And as one member said, I wouldn't have my PGs if it were not for AIPG. So they recognized all of these other things that AIPG does. This is a little bit of a synopsis. What does AIPG provide that my state license doesn't? Goes beyond state borders. For those clients in states without licensure, when they ask about your credentials, you can show that you have credentials. It supports those licensing boards, and it provides the training. And for geologists working internationally, this is really important here. So the CPG status is recognized as qualified person for public disclosure under the Australian Joint Ore Resources Committee, or JORC, under the Canadian National Instrument 43101 and for U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission SK 1300. So mining companies have to give public disclosure documents. Qualified persons must sign off on those documents. This is really important for anybody working in mining. You just never know what you're going to be doing in the future. So what's also important for those geologists working internationally is that Alaska, to become a professional geologist in Alaska, you need to be a CPG. They don't have a state licensing board, so that's how Alaska took care of that. They just said if you're a CPG, you can apply to become a PG in Alaska. For AAPG, they have reciprocal recognition. The European Federation of Geologists, the Geological Society of London, which is the United Kingdom, and then the Institute of Geologists of Ireland. So you can apply with your CPG to practice in where these folks have jurisdiction. AIPG has a proven history and a distinguished reputation. It is fantastic to be celebrating 60 years. And in my year as president, it has allowed me to see how important AIPG is internationally, and the recognition that AIPG has, because AIPG has been interacting with folks in other countries. We have members in 45 different countries. That doesn't mean we have hundreds of people in each of those countries, but for someone who wants to be recognized as a professional, AIPG is really important. And we collaborate on these different committees, the CRISCO, the Global Geoscience Professionalism Group, the Australian Institute of Geoscientists, the Geological Society of South Africa, Namibia, Western African Institute of Mining, Metallurgy, and Petroleum, Geoscientists Canada, the American Geosciences Institute, and GeoAnsata, and then the International Raw Materials Observatory. It was really it was a privilege to see how important AIPG has been for some of these different organizations, and that our standards meet standards across the globe. So that is a really neat thing, and there will be some of these folks at the meeting in Covington. If you have any people who come up to you and ask you, well, how do I become an AIPG member? And how do I become a CPG? These are some of the details about it. So it's education, experience, and sponsorship. You need a bachelorette or higher degree. You need to give your supporting documentation, your transcripts from the school. You need verification from employers, a minimum of 8 years. So a lot of times I'm meeting with folks who have 20 years of experience and now they want to become a CPG. And if you're like me, some of those companies don't exist. You can't find some of those supervisors anymore who can verify your employment. The highest priority is to show the last 8 years of your professional experience. And we understand that, yeah, mergers and acquisitions have happened. I mean, supervisors who are no longer with us, all that sort of stuff. Also, you can get credit if you have an advanced degree. It's important to show that this is professional experience. It's not just as a technician. If you have 8 years of mud logging, that's not considered to be advancement as a professional. The applicant fills out all this information. We now have the CPG totally online, so it's much faster. It's a lot easier for everybody. You can just upload information. There's no longer a notary required. So life is much easier with everything being able to be done electronically. And sponsorship, it's 2 CPGs, and you want 3 people at least total who verify your reputation and your commitment to ethics. So there are other certification programs for geologists. Just want to mention these because those folks working outside of the U.S. may need to have those certification programs. There's actually licensing in Canada. SME has a certification program where your CPG is recognized. There in Australia, there's several, Ireland, European, Africa, also the Chilean. There are some other, just for full disclosure, there are other licensing and certification programs. Now, if you don't want to become a CPG, there are plenty of other options too. We have a professional membership category, which just means you have a bachelor degree in geology. You can also take advantage of being an early career professional if you're just 5 years within having earned your bachelor degree, because you get discounted membership dues. And there's the emeritus. So if you're 65 years or older, you're no longer actively engaged, you can become an emeritus. You pay a discounted membership fee, but you still get to do all the fun things like go on field trips and participate. So we have sometimes as many emeritus members as we have active members going on field trips. And of course, student adjuncts, that's a freebie that we encourage all students to become an AIPG member. And there's also something called an associate adjunct, somebody who's not a geologist, participates in AIPG activities. So they are very welcome, and we enjoy having lots of folks. So what are the sort of things that AIPG does? We do a lot of different things. So we do provide professional development and training opportunities such as webinars. We do technical webinars. We do non-technical webinars. We interact with a lot of other geologic organizations on government policy issues. ASBOG is always the first, they would call AIPG right away if there's a delicensing movement, for example. We participate on a lot of boards and committees. We participate on government boards. We participate on boards that are for nonprofits. We support licensing. We share our ethics code to other organizations, and other organizations have modeled their ethics code on AIPGs, which we're very happy to have done. This is the sincere use of plagiarism. We have a publication that professional geologists, we have peer-reviewed papers in that. This is good for students, especially graduate students, PhD students, where they need to get papers out there and make their name. Good for anybody who's a professor wanting to get tenure. It's good for anybody working in geology who wants to build their CV. We support our section activities. So now if any section ever needs ideas of things to do, needs a speaker, just call the national office. We can provide you with support. And we have a memorandum of understanding with some other organizations. And then we provide mentoring and professional development activities specifically for students and EPC members. So for example, on Saturday, we have a full day workshop where there'll be practice interviews, talk about how to get a job, what employers want, work-life balances, all that sort of stuff. And then we go to a lot of different conferences during the year, and we generally have a booth. So we'll be at the Geological Society of America. We'll be at the National Society of Legislators. We provide speakers, and we provide subject matter experts for testimony. So I've spoken in front of congressional hearings, things like that. And one of the things that I want to point out here is this testimonial that we received from a member. My first company made AIPG membership / CPG certification a precondition. Both parties benefited. When we hear stuff from our members saying how important it is, that means that yes, this is an organization that provides a function and it's important. So what are some of your opportunities for involvement with AIPG? Take advantage of the webinars. We have plenty of free professional webinars. We do technical series that has a small fee, $10 right now for CEUs. And that's really a bargain compared to an organization like SME, where it would be $50 to take a 1 hour webinar, and we only charge 10. And we even do some freebies, whether it's professional development or technical things. This past year, we've had a lot of talks that were mining oriented. We talked about the NI 43101 and mineral resource estimations. And now we're starting out on a water focused series of talks. So be looking for those as they come up. If you've never been to the annual meeting, it is really a great thing. I know it's not cheap, but we try to go to places that are wonderful field trip opportunities. We are family friendly, so it can be a vacation. Next year's meeting is going to be in mid-August, so it'll be a time that kids are out of school if you want to bring your kids. It's going to be in Durango, Colorado. The geology is fantastic. Plenty of field trips are being planned. For folks, who work as in consulting companies, we have lots of things that we need to show to our employers that we're developing professionally. So having opportunities to give a technical talk is something really important. So there are technical talks this year, next year, there are always technical talks that are available. And if you ever want to give a webinar, just let us know. We're always looking for speakers. As I mentioned before, you can submit articles to the TPG, and the sections have lots of activities too. So some sections are very active, like Minnesota, and some sections like Arizona, we usually only have 2 things a year, but we try to do some fun field trips. Here we are out on a mine site in April, and we went and combined with the New Mexico section in June, and we went to a couple different things. One was a very large array, which, for non-geologists, that was an interesting thing. So it's truly like bring your partner, and it's not all geology. We try to go to something interesting for everyone. And another really important thing is our advocacy efforts. So whether it's supporting things that are of interest to geologists on state or federal level, or this licensing, or serving on boards and committees, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes. If you're looking for some field trip opportunities and want to come to Arizona in February when the weather is beautiful, we have 3 field trips that will be part of the SME annual conference. SME is one of those MOUs that I was trying to remember. So we have a memorandum of understanding with SME, which is the Society of Mining Engineering, Metallurgy, and Exploration. So the geology is the exploration part of it. So to make sure that there's plenty of geology in their annual conference, we agreed that AIPG would make sure we got technical sessions focused on geology and field trips in the menu. So we've got 3 field trips. 2 are to mine sites, and 1 is around the Phoenix Basin to look at earth fissures caused by overpumping of groundwater. And then we're going to have 2 technical sessions that AIPG has coordinated. One will be critical minerals, and the other one will be discoveries from geologic exploration programs. And yes, this is an earth fissure in the Phoenix Basin. It's not just what I tell you about AIPG, but the best evidence is what our members have said about AIPG. So I took a bunch of things that AIPG members had said about AIPG, and I put together this. There are lots of people who have benefited greatly from their AIPG membership, whether it's from honing skills to making friends to growing their network. I hear all the time that AIPG members are incredibly open and welcoming. That is enough about me talking. I want to thank you for being here, and I would welcome hearing your thoughts and comments.
Thank you, Don.